Hey everybody, thank you so much for stopping back by the channel. If you're new, please consider subscribing and leave me a comment to let me know what you think about this topic. So as you see with the title, today I want to talk about the idea of God always feeling the need to test people. In this video, I am going to use the name Jehovah. So why does Jehovah always feel the need to test people? We know that this is an age-old practice that began in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve was put in a situation that seemed to be set up as a test. Now, when it comes to Adam and Eve, I have my feelings about these things. I don't take the Bible at face value if you didn't already know that. But if this were a true story, when it comes to Adam and Eve, there is no indication, according to that story, that they had been faithful one way or the other up to the point of the test. So to test people in that situation, okay. But what about those who have already proved that they are faithful? They've been living a life of faithfulness. They've shown that they will listen to God. What about those individuals? We have been under the impression that this all has to do with Jehovah's sovereignty, with proving his sovereignty once and for all, with answering the taunts of Satan the devil, who seems to, want to always, go back and forth with God about whether or not humans will stay faithful. So that's what we grew up believing as Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm sure many other Christian religions, teach that same thing. But now that I'm not in the religion anymore and have started to consider things differently, sometimes I do question some of these things. And over the years, I have thought about some of this stuff. So the Bible makes it seem like Jehovah is able to tell the future, that he knows the end in the beginning. The Bible makes it seem like Jehovah is able to read our hearts, that Jehovah knows what one needs before he or she even asks, which means that he can read our hearts. He can read our thoughts. You don't have to pray out loud. You just, say it in your mind, and he knows. But he also knows before you even ask. So this is, shows a lot about the ability of the one who created us, right? So in the case of Adam and Eve, okay, going back to that, like I said, these were supposedly, according to the Bible, the first humans. So they hadn't yet, shown any faithfulness according to this story, right? But when it comes to other people, like for example, us in this day, if people are living their life faithfully and showing that they want to serve God, what is the purpose of having Satan roaming around here trying to test people? So let's look at a couple of accounts, okay, in the Bible. Both of these accounts, everybody's pretty familiar with. I'm going to focus on one main one, but the first one I want to talk about is Abraham. So with Abraham's situation, when he was told to offer up his son Isaac, this was a very traumatic thing that he was asked to do. Wouldn't you agree? To offer up your son that you love That would be very traumatic for anybody. So that would mean you would go through a lot of emotions if you felt that you had to do this thing that God was asking you to do, and you had no choice because he's the creator and you have to listen to him, right? So you would feel very emotional about this. You know, in Abraham's case, he wouldn't have understood what was going on because Jehovah had told him that the promised seed was going to come through Isaac. So he wouldn't have known what was going on. But he would have felt that he had no choice, right? And had to just stuff down all those emotions, just suck it up, and go do it. Now, before I continue with that, somebody said that in the comments at one point that witnesses actually now believe, although many of them don't know that this is what they believe, that Abraham actually knew that it was a test based on something that he said when he was about to go sacrifice Isaac. He basically said something like, me and the boy are going to go worship and we will return, or, something to that effect. So that's interesting that the witnesses feel like that. But then if that is true, if that's what they believe, then that makes the whole thing make even less sense, that he knew it was a test. So then who was the one that was really being put through the test then? Isaac, to see if he would willingly lay there and be sacrificed? But anyway, that's a whole nother story. I just wanted to bring that up in case any witnesses, are watching, and you guys know that witnesses think that. But again, going back to this, if you really think about all of the anguish and the confusion that Abraham would have gone through, it seems kind of interesting that God or Jehovah would ask him to do such a thing, knowing that he wasn't even going to make him go through with it, because he knew that he was going to bring this seed or this promise through Isaac. So it was really just going through the motions to see if he would actually do it. So then you get all riled up. You get them all riled up, because I'm taking the popular opinion on this story, not the witness, because most people think Abraham did know it was a test, right? Or did not. So that means he would have gotten, emotional about it. Okay, so you get them all riled up to get him to this position to go and put Isaac on the altar and all that. And then you say at the very last minute, now I know that you are faithful. But wasn't the fact that he was faithful initially is what made you tell him? Let me back up. When you told him to go move and leave his relatives, didn't that show that he would be faithful, that he was a faithful type of person? Isn't that why you approached him in the first place, Jehovah? Because you saw something in Abraham's heart, and so therefore you was choosing him. And you told him to move away from your relatives and do all of this, which he willingly did, according to this story. Right? And just these other things that he willingly, you could see that he was he would always say, here I am, so he was like a very willing person. So if you already knew that he was that way and he was a righteous type of person, why have him go through all the motions of doing all of this? Only to stop him. Does that really make sense? Like when you really think about some of this stuff after you are no longer indoctrinated by a religion, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really make sense. Especially considering what I said, that God is able to look into the future and see what somebody's going to do. He's able to look into a person's heart and know what they would do in any given situation. So then it goes back to this. Is there more going on behind the scenes in these situations that we just don't know about? According to the Bible, one of the main ones mentioned that gives us a little behind the scenes peek, if you will, is the one I'm going to talk about right now, which is Job. We all know the story about about Satan coming before Jehovah, and then going to test Job after that conversation that he had with God, right? So how do we know that this is not always going on? How do we know it didn't happen with Adam and Eve? That God was like, okay, go test them and see if they're going to eat the tree. Like, how do we know? Just because it doesn't mention it in the Bible, there's all these things that we really don't know that we would have to read between the lines. So how do we know? How do we know that didn't happen in Abraham's case? Now, let me go. I'm going to get ready to talk about this Job thing, but let me just say this. When the case of Abraham, right? I do know that in the apocryphal books that are, the books that are missing from the Bible, that some people still, feel were canonical and all that. I have read some of them, and some of them, I think, not some of them, I think Jasher maybe is the one that talks about this whole Abraham story, like what happened before that, with Ishmael and, all of this different stuff, and some stuff that had to do with Satan and all of this stuff. So, there is something with that, but I'm not really bringing that, wasn't really bringing that in the mix because most people don't recognize those books. They recognize just simply the Bible, which doesn't really say anything happening before God tested Abraham. But in the case of Job, like I said, it definitely does say that there was this meeting that went on. But when I'm reading it, since I have been away from the organization, it just sounds different to me than it used to. So, okay, let's start here. Job chapter 1 and verse 7. So now we know that Satan came and presented himself with the other angels right in the presence of Jehovah, right? So in verse 7, it says, Jehovah asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" "From roaming through the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." So when Jehovah asked Satan where he was at, he just said, from roaming about on the earth and walking around on it. That doesn't sound like he had ill intentions. Whether or not he did is up for discussion or up for debate, but it doesn't say that. Okay, so then verse 8, then Jehovah said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil." Okay, now in the Witness Bible, it doesn't say have you considered, it said have you set your heart upon or something like that. So actually that sounds a little bit different than considered. Because if somebody just says, have you considered this? That's just like giving somebody something to think about, or have you thought about this? That doesn't imply that, you kind of have a feeling that this may be where they're headed in their mind, because when you say, have you set your heart upon, that it sounds like Jehovah is actually knowing that Satan is looking for people, and then he's trying to specify, have you set your heart upon this person? You know what I mean? But just simply saying, have you considered, that sounds a lot different. And most Bibles that I checked says it this way: have you considered Job? Right? So then when Satan answers Jehovah, he says, does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he owns, and he will surely curse you to your very face. Okay, so it sounds to me like all Satan did was respond to what Jehovah said. So how about if Jehovah never asked him whether or not he considered Job? What would have happened? It sounds like Satan is just responding to what he said. Jehovah said, have you considered Job? There's no one else on earth like him, fearing God, turning away from evil. And then Satan just gave his honest opinion about that. Well, yeah, but the only reason he does it is because XYZ. Okay? So that just seems like a dialogue going back and forth. Two entities having a conversation about what is going on with humans, right? And then, of course, he says, but take all of that away and see what he's going to do. Okay? But then Jehovah just says, very well, everything he owns is in your power. However, do not lay a hand on Job himself. Okay, so that was thoughtful. He told him don't kill him, but he said everything he has is in your power, which we already know. That meant, he killed his livestock and his children and all that. But the crazy thing about that is, why did Jehovah have to do that? The whole setup of these scriptures before Satan even appeared before Jehovah and all of that was talking about how faithful Job was. In verse 1, he was a man of complete integrity who feared God and turned away from evil, right? He was the type of person who would, pray on behalf of his children just to make sure, just in case they did something, he would do what he needed to do or make offerings and all of that stuff in order to appease, Jehovah or whatever. So the point is, he already demonstrated his integrity. He had already demonstrated the type of person that he was. Why would that change? There was no reason for it to change. So God just willingly just said, okay, take it all away and see what he does. The scripture talks about, I think it's in Proverbs 27 or something like that, where Jehovah is supposedly saying, be wise, my son, and make my heart rejoice, so that I may make a reply to the one that is taunting me. Do you know what it means to taunt? I'm sure you guys do. But does it sound reasonable that the Almighty should have a problem with someone taunting him? Think about that. As adults, imperfect humans, such low humans, supposedly, we don't have a problem with somebody taunting us. Our mother used to say, if it's not true, don't worry about it. If somebody calls you a name and it's not true, why are you responding? Right? Stuff like that. If you know it's not true, you could shut that situation down real quick. You don't have to respond. You don't have to sink down to their level and give in to whatever it is that they're trying to have you do, because they want to taunt you or tease you or tell you, this is what's, tempt you to basically do something as a result of their of the thing that they're trying to say, that they're trying to threaten you with, or the thing that they're trying to accuse you of. Because that's basically all it boiled down to in Job's situation. God had to prove it to Satan and the angels. Because obviously it wasn't about what God would know, right? If he's able to read a person's heart and he's able to look into the future and see what somebody would do, it wasn't about God needing to prove it. It wasn't about Job needing to reassure himself that he would stay faithful. He was already faithful. So the fact that God felt the need to answer to Satan is quite interesting. But the part that really gets me about this is after Satan tested Job, come back to chapter 2. He already kills the kids and kills the livestock, and then he comes back before Jehovah again in the heavens with the other angels. And then Jehovah again asked him, where have you been? And he said, roaming about on the earth and walking around, right? Then Jehovah brings up Job again. Have you considered my servant Job? This is verse 3, and I'm in the Christian Standard Bible. No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil. He still retains his integrity, even though you incited me against him to destroy him for no good reason. Okay, so now it seems like a tit for tat thing to me. Now Job got his livestock and his kids killed, and God is like, look, he's still integrity, he's still faithful, even though you did all this. Now what you got? That's basically what that sounds like to me, because he brought him up again. He's the one who brought up Job. Satan didn't say, oh, I noticed Job is, he didn't bring it up. According to this dialogue here, Jehovah brought it up and pointed his attention to it, right? But the part that's really interesting is that he says, you incited me against him for no good reason. For no good reason. So there you have it. Jehovah himself is saying that this was done for no good reason. So then why did he do it? Why did he allow Satan to do it? But then, of course, as we know, this didn't stop the test, because again, it was like a tit for tat, because God said he still retains his integrity, right? Now Satan is like skin for skin. A man will give up everything he owns in exchange for his life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. Then Jehovah again, very well, and he lets him do it, except for just don't kill him. I don't know, you guys. Does this really seem like this has to do with Jehovah's sovereignty? Really? Does it seem like that? Based on what we just read there. And if you really are critically thinking about it, the angels should know who is sovereign. Satan should know who is sovereign. Don't they know that they were created by Jehovah? So why does he need to prove it to them? Why does he need to prove it to them? It's like a parent feeling that they have to prove to their children that they're the one in control, that they are the one who has the authority to tell the children what to do. They might tell the children what to do, right? But they don't feel that they need to prove it to the children, like do something just to prove it to them. No, it's a given. I'm the parent. I'm the one who's in control of this house. Okay? So if that's the case, if Jehovah really is in control, and the angels and Satan knows this, then it should be something that should be easily silenced. I mean, like, I know what witnesses taught was that this was something that, okay, if he killed Adam and Eve right then at that moment, then, it would have opened up this whole thing where all of the angels and all that could be like, oh, it must have been true what Satan was saying. So, or not what Satan was saying, because it didn't even say Satan said anything at that point. It just said, basically that they ate the fruit and listened to Satan. So it was like, but basically this whole issue that was raised is what they say is something that would be able to be repeated, or, they would need to he would need to squash it once and for all. Right? But again, like I said, he doesn't need to prove it. He shouldn't need to prove it. If he chooses to prove it, then that's on him. That's his decision. Like, I want to show them that this is what it is. But then why are we in the middle of all of this? That's the thing. Why are we in the middle of this? If all of this, that's what's going on in our day, if it really was what is said in the Bible, why would we be caught up in the middle of this, because it really seems like a feud between God and Satan. And obviously Satan seems a little bit more equal to God than what most people think. Because first of all, why is he the only one doing this? Like, of course, you know, you could say, well, he was the one who fell and he was the whatever, but he took, according to this, he supposedly took a third of the angels. So there was obviously some other angels that felt a certain way too, right? But just the fact that, you know, God feels like he has to answer to Satan. He never silences Satan in any of this and says, Satan, you know, I got this. I mean, you never see that. You never see that. But you have, you know, humans who are supposed to not question anything, but you have the devil or Satan going and questioning God right in his face. And it's like, you know, it's just interesting to me that it's just allowed. It's just allowed. And it's just this, you know, this big back and forth thing between him and, you know, his adversary. My thing is this, and I'm gonna end it here. If God or Jehovah was not supposed to be, you know, omniscient, able to read hearts and all of that, then this whole thing would be totally different. I know what witnesses said as far as, you know, he can choose to tune into a particular event. Like in Adam and Eve's case, he chose not to know what they were going to do, right? But is that what's going on now? Because the way stuff sounds now, he knows our hearts. He knows our intent. He knows all of this stuff. If the case of Adam and Eve, the very first humans, if that's what it was, he chose not to know. Okay. But when it comes to our day, what is going on now? Doesn't he know our hearts? Why would the scriptures say, you know, don't be anxious. You don't have to ask for anything because your heavenly Father knows what it is that you need, and he knows before you even ask and all of this stuff. So then if that's the case, it seems like we're in a little bit of a different situation than the first man and woman, because he knows what we got going on. And because of the fact that he can supposedly read our hearts and our thoughts, that's what makes it so crazy that he would allow Satan to just roam around and test people, because he already knows what we're going to do. So anyway, you guys, I really didn't have much else to say on this topic. I feel like I kind of babbled a little bit towards the end there, but just something I've always, you know, thought about and talked to other people about, you know, and just wondering, what do you think? Leave your comments and let me know. Okay. I look forward to seeing you on my next video. I hope you guys have a great week. Take care.